Hello, everybody. Happy New Year from the Fort team, and welcome to the first webinar of our 2022 season. Um, Today, we have a great discussion that will be moderated by Fort's Program Director, Stefani Koff. I am Simbiat Yusuf, the Member Relations Manager at Fort. And before we get on with the panel today, we have a few updates from the Fort team. Attendees will ask that you submit all your questions through our attendee chat. We will record this webinar and share the recording as well as our panelist presentations after the webinar today. So if you have any questions, make sure they're in the attendee chat for us. We'll have about 20 minutes for Q&A towards the end. And since it's a new year, for some of you that are joining us for the first time, who is Forth? Forth is a nonprofit trade association on a mission to accelerate the use of smart transportation through our work in 4 focus areas, which are industry developments, such as our events at Roadmap, policy advocacy, consumer engagement, and demonstration project. Through these work, we aim to accelerate the use of smart transportation and change the way we move to a cleaner and equitable way. Thank you again for joining us. We want to thank you all for your support in 2021, and we want to say there are plenty of opportunity this year. If you're interested in more visibility on the webinar, we are currently looking for webinar sponsors, and we also want to say thank you to our members. Our work will not be possible. These webinars will not be possible without the support from our members and sponsors. We are still hiring. We are hiring for the position of the Director of Development and Communications, as well as a Senior Program Manager. If you're interested in these positions, we're currently accepting application. We will share more information about the job posting in the webinar recap. And please feel free to share with your networks regarding the opportunity. And registration is still available, although the pre-sale prices ended January 14th. Early adopter rates are now available, and you can save using the early adopter rates. Sponsorship opportunities is still available if you're interested in sponsorship. If you're interested in attending the conference, you can reach us at roadmapforth.org, where you can find more information on everything Roadmap. And we hope to see you all June 29th or through the 30th this year in Portland, Oregon. And with that, I will pass along to our moderator today, Stefani.
Hello, Simbiat. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Stefani Koff. I'm the programs director for Forth, and I lead program specialists that advance equitable electric transportation initiatives. Right now, we live under 3 pillars of work, which is access to EVs, access to charging, and access to emerging modes, such as micromobility and e-tractor. Like Simbiat said, we are hiring, and no more pitches. I won't make it about us at Forth. So I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have Hans-Erik Merlin from Circular Energy Storage. Hans leads a London-based consultancy focused on lithium-ion battery lifecycle management. His company helps other companies and organizations to understand and address opportunities and challenges in the lithium-ion supply chain, in particular after the batteries have been placed on the market. Zora Chung, she's representing Rejoule, and that is a battery life diagnostic company that runs specialized characterization battery techniques to accurately grade the quality of a battery. Thank you, Hans-Erik Merlin and Zora Chung, for coming. As a way for us to get grounded and present, I'm all over the place with the tongue words. Let's do a bit of a icebreaker, right? And I think a good question that we can give to the panelists and to the people listening to this webinar in Symbiote. You can help me with the technical things of it. And in honor of, new year, new me, 2022, what are steps we are taking to reduce your carbon footprint in 2022? And we have a poll up, getting populated. Nice. The other is interesting to see the comments coming in. Home improvements can look like adding solar panels to your house, using electric modes of transportation, composting, like creating worm bins, right? Getting that added, that last bag of salad that always seems to be in the back of the fridge, right? I feel guilty every time I waste it. You got to move it right over to the compost bin. And learning more about EV battery recycling is exciting. Why we're here, right? We're getting close. Very cool. Cool. Thank you for being here. Hans, you're ready. Like to...
I think I am. Can you hear me well?
Awesome. Yes, we hear you.
Okay, very good. So I'll take it away. All right. So yeah, thank you for inviting me. I mean, I see the attendee list here. It's a nice one. So I'm really happy to be here. And yeah, there's not a lot of time, so I will go right on it. Let's see here. Okay, there we are. Yeah, so what I would like to talk about today is, yeah, I mean, obviously you asked me to talk about Second Life for EV batteries, and that's the theme, all right? But I would try to talk about, or I would like to talk about three things. One thing is that there are not so many batteries out there to use in Second Life system. I think a lot of Second Life companies actually experience that, and I will talk a little about why that is, and why that might be a situation for a fairly long time. I would also like to talk about that Second Life might not be what you think that it is. And lastly, I want to try to explain why Second Life is not really a waste management strategy, but it's at least to me, and I think it should be, it's a way to monetize your battery in a better way. It's not an alternative to recycling. So let's see if I do this correctly. Yeah. Circle Energy Storage, as we mentioned, we are a company that collects data about lithium-ion batteries in all kinds of applications, but it's obviously a lot of EVs. Based in London, and provide data from the point when the batteries are on the market, and from the what is happening, how are they used, will they be reused or recycled, and we cover the market globally. So when it comes to lithium-ion batteries, I think what many might not realize, and maybe all participants here do realize that, but I think it's worth just emphasizing that you basically never touched lithium-ion batteries unless you are a professional, because lithium-ion batteries are built into the devices they power. And what we really see in the last 10 years is how we have seen more and more applications added to the repertoire for lithium-ion batteries in what they are powering. We used to use them only for basically portable electronics, and through the years we've been adding larger and heavier applications. And what's really important is that they in fact are lasting much longer. So from an average of 3 to 5 years in the applications. Now we place batteries in applications that might last 15, 20, and even 25 years. And the electric vehicles are really one of that application. And I think many wonder, I mean, how can you actually use electric vehicle batteries for 20 years? We all hear about everything from 5 years to 8 years. A common story is that when the batteries reach 8 years, it only has like 80% of its capacity left, and will magically just pop out of the car and being used in an energy storage system and things like that. That is not really the case. That is not the experience. I mean, today we have throughout the world, we have electric vehicles that are more than 10 years old, and we see that they in fact are doing really well. So this is a way to just use data to just prove the case why you might have these batteries in the vehicles for a very long time. Here we've been using 2 quite common sedan models in the US, the BMW 3 Series and Toyota Corolla, and we look at how far are these cars driven throughout their life, and how old will they get. Obviously, from the day you place a car on the market, that might unfortunately reach end of life the day after. But most of the cars are actually living really, really long lives. And if we then add data on how long will these batteries last during different kind of circumstances, what we show here is unless you are a really heavy user, if you're driving as an Uber driver or a taxi, they will last for a very, very long time. And we also see that we are driving less the older the vehicle gets. So of that reason, we can actually use it much longer when it reaches like 15 to 20 years. Another thing which is also affecting the availability of the batteries is if now the batteries are reaching end of life, how? And what you see here is 2 ways, and you almost only see one of them. The small blue line down to the left here is the batteries that reach end of life within this warranty period. That is in fact the only time when the OEM is both responsible and have access to that battery, unless they have been leasing the battery in some way, but usually they haven't. So the batteries most of the batteries will reach end of life with no control for the OEM to really do something about it. And the major way, or the most common way why it is reaching end of life is really because it is it's not economical to repair the vehicle in which the battery is sitting. There definitely been an example of how batteries have been degrading and being replaced, but usually after its warranty period, it's just too expensive to do that. So you are selling the vehicle for less money instead of actually replacing the battery, although that is happening as well. So the batteries that that comes out of the vehicle, they usually do that because they are crashed. But what we also see is that when a vehicle is crashed or written off of some reason, increasingly they are in fact exported, because we have a lot of countries that want these vehicles, and vehicles that used to actually go to car centers, which they still are, of course, many of them the US car goes in this direction.
Hi, Hans. You're having some connection issues. We missed a lot of what you said in the last slide.
Okay. All right. You didn't. Okay. All right. I just wrap up that slide then. So a lot of the vehicles will actually go overseas, and the batteries obviously will go with them, because electric vehicles are very popular from or in many countries, and both from Europe and the US, and increasingly also from China. We have vehicles that go out to the other markets, and that obviously leave less batteries to use in the second life. But when they do reach the car dismantlers, or they reach the OEMs, we have a very diverse second life market. And I think it's really important to emphasize that the second life market is much more diverse than what many people are thinking. We always talk about second life as batteries used in energy storage with OEM. Sorry, I see that with OEM I mean basically the car manufacturing in this case. But we see much more. One of the most popular ways of using electric vehicle batteries is in fact in other vehicles to do conversions of ICE vehicles to electric vehicles. And this is also because it's so distributed, because they are not really in consolidated numbers. So even if we talk a lot about the energy storage systems and the potential to use them there, most of the batteries goes actually in much smaller application. And they are prepared to pay much more for the batteries. So usually, if you take Tesla Model S batteries, which is the most common battery to reach end of life in the US, because it's the most common electric vehicle, or used to be, they cost around $200 a kilowatt hour today. So they're just too expensive to use in energy storage in many ways. And how can these more alternative markets, how big can they be? Like do-it-yourself sector, I mean, it's really marginal. Yes, in some way it is. But it is in fact growing, and it's growing rapidly. And if we use everything from just seeing how many people that are doing this, converting their cars to electric, how many startups are in fact involved in Second Life in different ways, there are a lot of them. So again, going back to what we so often talk about, Second Life batteries being removed from the vehicles, placed in large energy storage systems to support the grid or to support the commercial and industrial applications. Isn't that happening? Yes, for sure, of course it's happening. But it's mostly really happening when you have a relation with the OEM, and when an OEM or a fleet in some cases have the opportunity to consolidate a large number of batteries. But it's not really happening by itself. It's not like it's piling up in scrapyards and then you suddenly can use them in Second Life system. I would say that is happening in very, very rarely. What is happening is that you have upgrades of batteries that can be used. So the last thing I wanted to talk about here is this. That's the biggest waste of all, as I see it, is that we are not really using the batteries that much. Most of the batteries are staying unused on the driveway. And I think this is what Second Life, and not only Second Life, is about. That, oh, sorry, oh, that was not good. I pressed the wrong one here. Let's see. Sorry about that. We have some slides to go through. There we go. So, as I see Second Life is something that you, as a car maker or as a fleet, somebody that actually have control of the battery at some stage, you have it's a deliberate strategy that you are trying to monetize the batteries as much as possible, and it goes in the same direction as battery swapping, as we see here for NIO or for scooters that it's also used for, and for vehicle to grid, that we are monetizing the battery more than just leaving it in the car. And I think this is really where we should look at Second Life. Can you prematurely remove a battery, for instance, and to use it in other applications, not because the old battery was bad, but because new batteries are better, for instance. And now you can, in an organized way, remove the batteries and use in larger systems. And my final take on this is what actually was presented last week from CATL, the so-called Choco battery, which is, to me, it's a very neat solution where you're using only that kind of battery capacity at the occasions which you really need. So here in London, for instance, I rarely use more than 20 kilowatt hours of my battery. And if I can have that battery while I'm driving in the city, but then when I would like to go to the sea, I can just go to a swapping station and add some 40 to 60 kilowatt hours. And the batteries can also be used in energy storage while waiting for be swapped, or they can also be removed when they are starting to degrade. I think that kind of solution is really, really interesting. And I think it's really important to look at battery swapping not as an alternative to charging, but in fact just a way to actually to optimize the use of the battery. So that was my final one.
Thank you, Hans. Whew, you covered a lot. And I guess we will hold our questions to the end after we have Zora's presentation. I was recently learning about Amble. I don't know if you're familiar. It's becoming a bigger name modular battery swapping company.
Sure.
And that process is fascinating. Yeah. Okay, Zora, you are representing Rejul in your presentation. Pretty please.
Yes, I am. All right. It looks like I can get started here. Great. So hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today to learn more about Second Life batteries. So at Rejul, our mission is to maximize the value of electric vehicle batteries. And we want to do this by streamlining its life cycle from cradle to cradle. And we do this through our fast battery diagnostic platform that performs health checks in minutes without sacrificing accuracy. So over the next few minutes, I'll provide a brief overview of Rejul, highlight some of the obstacles that we're seeing when repurposing used electric vehicle or EV batteries, an overview of our solution, which includes 3 case studies, and other issues we're experiencing, which is documented in our blogs. After that, I'll cover what's next on our roadmap to further address these problems, and I'll wrap up with how you can work with us and get more information. So Rejul was founded over 4 years ago when my technical co-founder, Stephen, personally experienced the problem of how inefficient it is to model and understand the battery's remaining health. He realized it was necessary to set a new standard by making better data and modeling tools available. Since then, we've raised almost $5 million in grant funding to support the research and deployment of our technology, $3 million of which comes from the California Energy Commission and funds Rejul to repurpose used EV batteries into a stationary application. The bulk of what I'm presenting today comes from the work we've been doing on this grant. Additionally, we're very excited to talk about a conditional approval for an additional $500,000 to work with one of our partners to build a marketplace for used EV batteries, which will bring our total grant funding to over $5.3 million. So I'm sure all of us here are very excited about the increasing adoption of EVs, but the reality is in about 3 years, we will need to figure out what to do with the 3.4 million battery packs retiring from electric vehicles. We're already starting to see them pile up at different customer sites because the cost to ship and recycle batteries we're estimating costs upwards of $1,000 per pack. As they look to repurpose though, there is a big question. What is the battery's state of health? I like to joke that used batteries are like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. So you actually have to test every single battery. However, the current process to test batteries is to cycle it, which is to charge the battery up to 100% and discharge it down to 0. The equipment you see on the screen is what we have in our lab today to perform that testing. It's expensive, and getting one data point takes between 6 to 10 hours. However, UL 1974, which some of you may know is the only test standard that exists on repurposing batteries, it outlines a procedure that takes 40 hours non-stop to qualify one used batteries. So in an 8-hour workday, it takes 1 week. Stephen, our CEO, is a standards technical panel member on UL 1974, and he's definitely shared the feedback that this isn't reasonable and will make used battery repurposing prohibitively expensive. We've been documenting our grading process versus UL 1974 in one of our blogs, which I encourage you to check out on our website. Rejoule would like to introduce a more viable solution where we can get results in minutes or seconds. We leverage a technique called electrochemical impedance spectroscopy, but you can say EIS for short. It's a non-invasive and fast test that is seen as the gold standard to characterize batteries. However, its use has been limited to lab testing and only at the cell level. Stephen was able to innovate and scale up the technology to create larger batteries in the field. Our solution comprises of hardware, software, and algorithms. And our hardware connects to the battery terminals to perform the measurement. Our software does the data processing to create our aging algorithms. From there, we can provide the battery state of health in amp hours or kilowatt hours. We've tested a variety of battery types and graded about 1 megawatt hours of used batteries in the last year from different chemistries, form factors, and configurations. Now, I'll walk you through our 3 case studies. In all cases, we had little to no historical information, and we followed the UL 1974 procedure as best we could. We used cycling data as our benchmark for accuracy, and then we did our own test as a comparison. In this first case study, we graded over 500 battery modules from 9 retired delivery trucks. We used 80% as the training set and 20% as the test set. The test set represents real-world samples that the battery model has never seen before, and the purpose is to validate how well our model behaves with new data. In this case, we performed a 5-minute and 30-second test. We found our 5-minute test produced accuracy within 2 seconds, 2%, and we wanted to see how much accuracy we would lose by speeding up the test to 30 seconds, and we were within 3.5%. So to determine if a battery can be repurposed, this accuracy is definitely more than good enough. In a second case study, we had 110 used and new cells as a reference. The duration of our test was 1 second and 5 minutes. Again, we were able to achieve similar accuracy. On the screen, we plotted the distribution of cells by amp hours from cycling on the left and Rejoule's test on the right. The colors signify if the batteries were new or used, and if they were used, if they had any comments on them. Some of them actually said, no bueno. However, the ones that were flagged as bad weren't always bad. They were just part of a bad pack, but most of the cells were actually still quite healthy. From this analysis, we actually recommended the customer delay their replacement schedule since most of their cells were not very degraded. This could yield huge cost savings as we scale and electrify more and more of our vehicles and even forklifts. And finally, we've gone through the same process, but also for some retired bus batteries, which you can see the results at the bottom. Again, we were able to achieve accuracy within 2% and speed up the test time significantly. We also learned that across these case studies, it took us 50 battery samples or less for the model to start producing accuracy within 3%. So if you have any battery characterization or grading needs, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to perform a similar study. Some other issues that we've identified, and you can find more of this on our blog, and I'd like to start talking about it with everyone so we can really address these issues. Keep in mind this is based on our experience and is not a comprehensive list, and we will continue to add more to our blog. So the first one is disassembly. If you want to repurpose modules or test the batteries, there will be some required, and how complex this is might depend on how the battery pack is designed. Oftentimes, they are not designed to be easily taken apart. Furthermore, if you look to do this at scale, it may be hard to automate because the battery pack from Tesla will differ from that of a Nissan. And even in the case where we tested 500 battery modules, we had 27 battery packs from 9 of the same electric delivery trucks. However, you can't still automate the process because there can be damage. These batteries have been on the road, so a big pothole could cause a few screws to get welded in place. Then you can be really screwed. Jokes aside, the other challenge that we're facing is the lack of critical information. So if you're buying a used battery, you're likely not getting it directly from the OEM. So you might have to look online to find basic battery specifications. Once you get that, having some historical information on the battery is the next hurdle. If you're in contact with the previous operator of the vehicle, they may have some information they can share, but it depends on how well they keep their records. And oftentimes we're finding that it takes too much effort to be able to match the record to the right battery or vehicle. A lot of people might be asking, well, what about the battery management system that tracks a lot of historical information? But unfortunately, automakers often see this as proprietary, and they have specific instructions to remove that before it's sold in its second life market. On a more technical level, there's cell imbalance. No battery degrades the same way, even if they come off the same manufacturing line, were produced at the same time, and were used in exactly the same conditions. This is why you not only need to test used batteries, but you also need to pair it with other batteries of similar health in its second life application to enable it to last longer. Ideally, advances in battery pack technology will make cell imbalance less of an issue over time. And the final challenge I'd like to bring up is the stationary placement of the battery in its second life system. Now, batteries are still dangerous, and they need to be designed with the worst case scenario in mind. So in the case of stationary, this requires a lot of space. So 10 feet to be exact, at least according to California standards. You need 10 feet between the battery and any path of egress, vegetation, and property line. This can really limit where you can put a new or used battery system, especially if we're talking about urban areas where there isn't always an abundance of space. So we don't have solutions to all these challenges, but we look to partner with other organizations and regulatory bodies to make it easier and more economical to repurpose that used batteries over time. One of the ways we seek to do this is in our newest product. We're actually scaling up our technology to test batteries in vehicle, and this will allow us to move up the value chain so that we can understand the battery state of health before it's even removed from the EV. That way we can pre-qualify it if it can be repurposed versus it just needs to get recycled. In an ideal scenario, you can ship the battery directly to its second life application without having to test and store it yourself, which can be very, very costly. We're targeting to have our first prototype ready by the middle of this year, and we're seeking OEM partners now so we can create a product and can work with your flagship EVs. So to get involved, you can start out by reaching out to us for a consultation, and you can email us in the email at the bottom, info@rejuelenergy.com. If you can let us know what the key problem and applications you want to address, any information you have on the battery or vehicle, as well as your timing and budget, would be incredibly helpful. Now, if you'd like to just get more general information, you can go to our website. The QR code will take you there now. You can also follow us on social media. On our website, you can actually request 3 pre-recorded technical presentations, which is way more technical than what I shared today. Once you're there, you just need to navigate to what we do and our technology. So in closing, understanding a used battery's health is critical to enabling repurposing and the circular economy. And Rejule offers a faster way to qualify these batteries. We have the capabilities to test cells and modules now, and we're scaling up the technology to test battery packs in vehicle. So please reach out to us because we'd love to help you maximize the value of your EV batteries. Thank you.
Thank you, Zora. Well, your presentation definitely has the chat booming. So we have some questions, and there's one that I think we should, I'm not doing this in in consistent order, but there's definitely a question here that we should probably clarify based on our presentations that there might be a miscommunication happening. Question 15, Chelsea Pentreco says that, Zora, you're saying that there will be millions of batteries available by 2025, but Hans is saying that so far there hasn't been that many. And oftentimes the batteries stay within used EVs. Can the two of you discuss where the difference in viewpoint stems from? Just added additional context, Hans. I think you spoke towards the diverse second life market. But can we clarify what this person is asking around the difference around supply of Second Life batteries.
Yeah, I think I can comment on. Unfortunately, I was saying like half of it trying to find this chat. Sorry, but I saw most of it. I mean, yes, I think we might be, if you look at from a Second Life point of view, or from a recycling point of view, we believe there will be less batteries available than what maybe many others believe, and I think we all agree that that's great, right? And that they will stay in the vehicles, and I mean that is what Rijol is now addressing as well, which I think has so much potential to actually and to measure the batteries while they are still in the vehicles. We have, I mean, it's been interesting this year starting last year in 2020 when we got the semiconductor crisis, and we saw how the markets were turning to second-hand vehicles in a much larger or much more than what they'd been doing before, and that obviously pushed up the prices of second-hand vehicles. In the US, we don't have so much electric vehicles, but obviously it pushed up the prices of them as well. I think then we start to see buyers that, I mean, today I think they might be afraid of buying those vehicles because they don't have an idea of what's the most important and expensive component in the vehicle, how that is faring. But with that kind of technology, we can see that we can take the right decisions. So, I mean, I think it's quite obvious if you look at it how that the batteries will remain in the vehicles for a very long time. But that doesn't disqualify this technology. It actually just increases the need for it, I think. And it's really about taking the right decision at every single time.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to that too is I think Hans' comment was that there aren't a lot available right now. And there's also an issue with finding where they are, which I think he covered in his presentation. But if you think about 2025 and you think back to about 8 to 10 years prior to that, which would be 2016 to now, then that's really when the volume of EVs on the road really started to grow. And that's also when China, which is the, has like half the EVs in the world, a lot of them buses, will basically start to retire. So if you think about commercial applications where the deployment was maybe a little bit later, but basically the retirement can be, and adoption can be a lot faster. That's where you start to see this, like a transition point, like a pivot in the battery supply. So, I think the short way to say it is, yes, it's not a huge issue now. A lot of people are just dealing with it by storing batteries in their warehouse to figure out what they can do. But it's going to get to the point where, you're going to have to get a new warehouse every year just to store these batteries. And that's really just, it's not realistic and it's not safe. Like these batteries, and it's also a waste, right? I think that's why we're all here, is to make sure that they get put back and actually help power a home, vehicle, building, whatever it is.
Thank you. Sora, another question that has a +1. How does battery non-standardization hurt recycling? Do we need to break the battery into its cells first?
Yeah, so non-standardization hurts anything in the aftermarket. So if you even think about, let's say if you were to get your vehicle serviced, right? Like a first generation Nissan Leaf and a fourth generation Nissan Leaf has actually different battery designs, so it might need different tools. Non-standardization, I spoke a little bit to disassembly being a challenge. So they need to disassemble the batteries. And for recycling, they need to break it down even further than we might need to do so for repurposing. So, definitely it would be great to see some standards so that there is some things that are replicable across the industry, because just like with like cell phone chargers, and even actually EV chargers right now, there's 3 standards. Let's hope that there isn't more, so that we're not creating a bunch of tools that end up eventually becoming waste at end of life.
Thank you. And this one is for Hans. In your research and data findings, did you see if any OEMs or politics in the US plan to implement some kind of battery tracking system?
No, I haven't. That's the that's the short answer in a sense. But as you may know, both in China there is a tracking system, and it is proposed in the European the new battery regulation in Europe as well. I mean, it's great with and I'm in favor of systems like having a battery passport, and obviously to be able to track it in a way. I think it's just like Zora said. I mean, the more information we have, the more kind of standardized it is. That's really good. But you don't only need passports. You also need checkpoints and passport control, right? And that, I think that's the general experience in China right now. You have a lot of passports, but they are not checking in at the checkpoints. So then it's not so much of a value to it. So I think if you look at a lot of people are pointing at the European Union, saying that there you have a more of a solid battery waste legislation, and it's only getting better with the new regulation. But in fact, if I want solid data on the collected or recycled batteries in the European Union today, I have to be fine with 2018 data. It's like 3 or 4 years old data. So we have a lot to improve, obviously. And I think that the market is kind of taking care of this themselves. And then I think we have OEMs like I think Proterra as a bus maker is a great example of offering leasing of the batteries. Obviously, if you lease a battery, you also know, or hopefully you know what that battery is and where it's used. I think that those kind of models we will see more of that. I'm pretty sure that is also the direction in China right now when it comes to swapping and more modular systems.
So speaking a little more on that, Hans and Zora, you talked about conversion vehicle markets and having mixed values and reputations, partly because warranties can get complicated. Can you address how long a converted vehicle has active value when it is using a second life battery, and what customers need to consider when making their decision to buy new or converted EVs?
Zora, do you want, or I can, from my perspective, I mean, first of all, the market is quite diverse. So you have a lot of just do-it-yourselfers, and they only have themselves to blame, kind of, if something goes wrong. And there are quite a lot. And then you have obviously not least companies that actually emerge from the do-it-yourself sector, and then a lot of really professional, great companies that are doing these conversions, both of fleets or of like classic cars. I mean, I think that's just another example of how Rejules technology and obviously others companies doing the same thing, how that add value to it. So you actually, as an entrepreneur, as a company, can feel assured that you can offer those kind of warranties, and that's why I really think that we will see more of that.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, and this is something I actually heard in a podcast on the conversion, is that I love the idea because most cars on the road are actually not new; they're actually bought used. So to the extent that we can not create more new vehicles is great. I think where there's challenges is that, as most of you probably know, batteries are much heavier. So in the conversion process, I think one thing that's important to understand is basically what's like the weight that the vehicle was originally designed to handle, because if you're putting in a much bigger battery system than it can handle, then over time you might see a lot more wear and tear on the frame of the vehicle. And so I think those are some considerations that don't immediately come to mind that people should take into consideration. And then on conversion itself, we've talked to a few companies that have done that. I don't really know too much details in terms of the science and the engineering that goes behind it, but just make sure you do your research and definitely ask about warranties and like what's the best way to maintain the vehicle.
Can I just add some which nobody asked, but still just in the same theme here, because I think the conversion of vehicles, it's really interesting to just understand, just as one example, to understand the drivers for Second Life and what is happening after a battery has been used in its first application. Because, most of the conversion companies or even do-it-yourself, they would rather use first life batteries that they know exactly, what they actually get. One problem is that often they actually don't know what they are getting. When they order something on Alibaba or eBay, in many ways they actually feel much more comfortable of using a Tesla Model S battery. But if we suddenly have somebody that are offering now for like $150 a kilowatt hour or something, or even $250 a kilowatt hour new batteries that goes well in these kind of applications, I think there you have a lot of second life opportunities that might get lost, and then it will move on to another application. And the battery space basically will always go to the highest bidder. And currently, for some batteries, not all, and that is another thing that is quite interesting in this sector, that we talk so much about like chemistries or NCA better than LFP for a second life and so forth. In this particular case, it's actually more about form factors, which kind of refers to what Dora said, what can we actually use to make it? A Tesla Model S module is much better than a Tesla Model 3 module, because that is just so much bigger, higher voltage. Really, they have the same chemistry, but it can't just be used for the same applications. And I think that is really important to understand. Only if you don't like it, there is somebody else that might like it. That is so important when you try to understand who will actually get the batteries when they reach end of life.
Thank you, Hans. Another question I have for both of you is, and you kind of spoken towards this in your presentation, so excuse me if it comes off a little redundant, but what are your organizations doing to advance the reality of mainstream second life batteries, and what are some of the milestones so far?
Dora, it's your question. More than mine.
Right.
My answer is that we are doing nothing. We are just showing what everybody else are doing. That we are trying to not have so much of an opinion. I hope that we have collected so much data soon, so we actually might be more operative. But today I have to admit, we are just telling the world what everybody else are doing and trying to do it in a systematic way.
That's a good answer. Word. Sorry, I can't tell if you're muted.
Yes, I was muted. Sorry, could you repeat the question? I was actually reading the attendee chat.
Oh, yeah. What is Rejoule doing to advance the utilization, the interest, the engagement with second life batteries?
Yeah, our focus and our core competency is actually understanding battery health. And this could be at any stage in its life cycle. So, the pack level tester I mentioned can also help assess residual value. So helping sell used EVs and properly assess residual value is one. But also talking about everything in the blogs, we'll continue to be sharing this information. We want everybody to be aware of all the challenges involved. We might not be in a position to solve all of those problems, but hopefully someone out there, maybe even in the audience today, can be a catalyst. And one other thing that we are doing, aside from sharing all the work with the CEC, and then also being very active in providing comments to regulatory bodies when they are relevant, is we are working with a partner to create a marketplace. Actually, just before this, we were on a call with a different potential partner that would be doing this in Europe. So, what Hans is talking about, like the fragmentation, the lack of collection, we can't solve that ourselves, but we can solve that with a lot of different partners that have different core competencies. So over time, we're looking, hopefully, maybe even in 2 years when this webinar is back again, is that we can actually talk about how we're so much closer to that ideal battery life cycle and how much waste we've reduced, like even just how many transportation hours we've reduced, because in the next few years, we're not going to be electrifying as many heavy-duty vehicles that are actually shipping these batteries around as well. So there's a lot of, I think, unintended costs associated with just transporting and being able to get these batteries to the right place.
Thank you. Is this a way to get started? And do we need OEM partnerships and separate batteries? Do the OEM
for sure? Because especially when I highlighted disassembly being hard, lack of historical information. If they're the ones making the battery pack prescriptive on who's responsible, I don't want to force a relationship. I think what we need is better collection. So like Hans said, like tracking, it's very expensive to operate here. And when you're doing recycling, you need a
No, I have to also a little bit to comment on the last one, and I saw some questions in the chat about capacity being building up in North America, so much more in fact than what you would see end of life. I think that they in the US, I think they take as much responsibility as these batteries are usually, not always, but usually they're worth a lot of money. We could make sure that there won't be like a loss. I think that's what we really have today. I mean, you don't really have to. I mean, if you have like high nickel, high cobalt batteries, you don't have to persuade so many recyclers, at least in the future, to actually take them. And I think you should be properly paid for it as well.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add. I think the only thing I would say, especially to the audience that's interested in this, is that this is a very new and growing industry. Electric vehicles themselves are still relatively new. So obviously the ecosystem, infrastructure, and understanding to repurpose them and recycle them in a second life application is still a budding industry. So, you might hear a lot of differences, and that doesn't mean that it necessarily conflicts. It just might mean that in certain instances, one methodology works and in another, a different methodology works. Just like look at that as an opportunity to be part of this major transition that's happening, and continue to learn. And you're welcome to follow Hans and our company like Rejoule and Circular Energy Storage to just continue to learn more and stay up to date.
Thank you, Zora. Thank you, Hans. Great call to action, Zora. And we are at 10:57. And we are going to close this webinar. I'm going to pass it on to Symbiot. Thank you so much for your time, Hans and Zora, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hall. Thank you, Stefanie, for moderating this panel. Zora and Hans, thank you for participating as our panelists. I do see a lot more comments and questions still coming in. Please don't fret. We will be sharing all of the questions with the speakers after the webinar as well, which will give additional opportunities for follow-ups. In the webinar recap, we will be adding our speakers so you can follow up on the conversation with them directly, or you can reach out to Forth and we can make the connections as necessary. So I do see this is a very engaging topic. Thank you all so much for joining us for the first webinar in 2022. We have a lot more content to cover until June, right before Roadmap. So stay tuned for more to come, and we hope you can join us in 2 weeks on Tuesday, February 8th, when we discuss Charged Up, what transportation agencies need to know about charging. Our speakers will talk about strategies of the infrastructure plan and how we can make sure we are bridging the barriers and we're bringing historically underserved communities into the forefront of the conversation. If you have any questions about upcoming events at Fourth, that you can reach out to us, or you can go to our website at fourthmobility.org to get more information on what's to come from Fourth. If you would like to hear more about the Fourth membership program sponsoring a webinar, please feel free to reach out to me. I will be sending the recap, so my email will also be in the recap. Thank you again for joining us. We truly appreciate you and spending this hour with us. And we hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Thank you.